Good morning everyone. I just want to make sure that we are on Facebook. Right, good morning. I hope you're all well. I hope your week has started well. I'm just going to give everyone a couple of minutes to log on, and I just want to make sure that I am on Facebook. If you can see me, please give me a wave. Good morning, Carrie Ann. Good to see you. I don't really get to see you, but it's so nice to know that you guys are there. And hopefully one day we will get to catch up face to face once again. Well, we've actually been incredibly blessed since about March. The weather this year has been amazing, and I've forgotten how dreary London weather can be until this week. It's taken me a bit by surprise. It's got cold and grey and wet. Morning, Charles. So, anyway, I hope you have all had a good start to your day so far. I'm going to just jump in. I hope everyone can see me and hear me. So, a few weeks ago in our devotionals, I spoke about surrendering to the unknown and trusting that God knows even when we don't know. Morning, Sarah. And I love how God prepares you and you don't even know that you are being prepared. Because since that devotional that I did a couple of weeks ago, it feels like a swarm of unknowns has come my way. And so I'm still camping around that same message. So I thought today we could just do a little bit more camping together. I think just like with anything in life, when there's a concept that you need to learn, you need to learn it and be explained it numerous times. Sometimes you need to learn it and approach it from different angles before you actually fully grasp it and understand it and know how to apply it to situations in your life. But God is a great teacher, and thankfully he is a very patient one, because he has been incredibly patient with me on this one. So I've had Corinthians 5 verse 7, for we walk by faith, not by sight, on repeat in my mind. Having faith in Jesus, knowing that God is the one and only God, that's fairly easy. But having faith in God's promises, in God's plans, and especially in God's timing, when you're surrounded by uncertainty, now that can be a bit more challenging for my humanness sometimes. But I was reminded this week of so many people in history who were surrounded in the natural with great and sometimes terrifying uncertainty and unknown. But in God's kingdom, so often things are not as they appear to be in the natural. The Bible is like a cliffhanger drama series. It's filled with so many significant God moments where the natural worldly situation seems hopeless, dire, frightening. Sometimes it actually just seems straight up crazy. If you consider, for example, Abraham. We all know that Abraham and Sarah were desperate to have a child of their own. God had promised Abraham that he would have a huge family, generations of people. And yet Abraham was nearly 100 and still did not have a child. In the natural, it did not look like Abraham and Sarah were going to have a child, let alone have generations of family greater than the number of stars in the sky as God had promised. Then God does fulfill his promise to Abraham, and he gives him a son, Isaac. And then God asks Abraham to sacrifice the son that he had waited so long for. Once again, in the natural, it did not look like Isaac was going to live to be part of this amazing promise that God had made. What about Noah? Now, God asked Noah to build this enormous ark in the middle of nowhere near the sea, because there was going to be a great flood that was going to cover the entire earth. In the natural, to the people around Noah, that seemed like a crazy idea for an unbelievable reason. And there was Joseph. Joseph was sold to slave traders by his deceitful and jealous brothers. And again, in the natural, it did not look like Joseph was being raised up to be Prime Minister of Egypt. And then when you think of Pharaoh and his army of Egyptians coming after the Israelites who had just managed to escape slavery. And then they've got the Egyptians behind them, the Red Sea in front of them. In the natural, in that moment, it did not look like the Israelites were going to be delivered and that the Egyptians were going to be destroyed. And my favorite, young David standing before this giant soldier, Goliath. I don't think any of the other soldiers around David could see in the natural or believed that the giant would be defeated and that David would enjoy victory and go on to be a significant leader. But in all of those accounts, there are individuals who trusted God so wholeheartedly, even though they did not understand the plans that God had. They couldn't see the way forward in the natural, but they had full faith in God's promises. Only eyes of faith could really appreciate what was happening in those circumstances. And what I love is in all of these situations, God came swooping in his perfect timing, even though for those people it might not have felt like the best timing. And he came in with his great and sometimes wildly miraculous plans, like parting the sea. And sometimes his plans were just so simple, like giving someone courage and a small stone. And just as all seemed lost, God brought protection, provision, mercy, blessing, and victory in those situations. The crucifixion of Jesus is also a great example, and probably the greatest example, of how things are not always as they appear in the natural. As Jesus hung on the cross, it appeared that godless men had defeated the one man that was most godly who had ever lived. And yet we know that in that moment, God was at work. He had an incredible plan, and he was preparing a resurrection victory over death and over sin for all who believe. Walking by faith some days literally requires putting just one foot in front of the other, taking one step of faith at a time. And it's a walk, not a run, not a race. It's moving forward at a steady pace, even when you want it to go faster, so that you can notice God's arrows along the way, pointing you in the right direction that you should go. I find some days, a lot of days lately actually, I've actually had to come to a complete stop in my mind and take a moment to reorientate myself, because I've become so distracted by my surroundings and my circumstances that I find myself in a place where I don't want to be and I don't need to be. When we walk by sight and get distracted by the circumstances in our natural world, we get caught up in worry and in doubt and consumed with trying to fix and control things, trying to predict what might happen in the future and how we want it to happen. But Proverbs 19:21 tells us, a person may have many plans for their heart, but the Lord's purpose wins out in the end. God has good plans for you. He has good plans for your family, plans to give you a future and a hope. And when we surrender to walking in faith, that's when those plans fall into place in His perfect timing. So just to share a bit about what's been going on, a small snippet of what's been going on in my life lately. As a family, we have just begun negotiating and navigating what feels like the minefield of trying to choose a secondary school for our eldest daughter. So we're trying to find a school that just feels right, a school whose ethos we agree with, one that we're within the catchment area for, just a school that's all around good, also a school that our daughter could potentially make her own way to every morning and come home from every afternoon by herself at the age of 11, which absolutely terrifies me. So ideally, I would actually like to find a secondary school that's really close to the primary school where my two younger children are, which has made us consider possibly needing to move house, and that in itself just opens up another whole minefield. And ultimately, whatever few schools we choose as our preferences, the decision doesn't come down to us, and we might not even get our choice school because it's all in the hands of the council. So pretty much all of that has set me off on a roller coaster that I have no control over. So the other day, as I sat looping on my roller coaster and asking God to please show me how and where and when and why and what, I felt God simply say to me, "Kelly, do you trust me?" And obviously I replied, "Yes." And so I felt him reply to me then, "Okay, well then, be still and trust me." And I was reminded of all of the times in my life where I felt like I've come to a major crossroads and not knowing which direction to take and trying to determine what my best options were and what the potential outcomes would be. And it was only when I finally just let go, let God sit in the driver's seat, that he so simply and easily steered me down the right road, on the path that was right, according to his plan, and on the path that got me to here. I am a terrible backseat driver. I've realized I'm probably the worst backseat driver when it's God who's driving. I often ask him and question his directions, even though I shouldn't. I often question his speed, especially the slowness of his speed. And I often just find myself so caught up in stressing about where it is that he might be taking me and not knowing the answer to that. So I find myself staring and focused just on the road ahead, trying to see what it is that he is doing and what his plan is and where we are going. And I've realized when I do that, I am just missing out on that opportunity to sit back in the passenger seat, exhale, relax, and be able to trust and know that he knows exactly where we are going, how we are going to get there, and the speed that we need to go at to get there, and even where we need to stop along the way. And I have this opportunity that I don't want to miss out on, that I can actually just sit back and find joy in the scenery around me as he helps me know and trust where we are going. So I think the only way that we can have peace is when we truly walk by faith. Hebrews 4:3 tells us that those who have believed enter into the rest of God. I just want to encourage you again that even when you know not, God knows. When we cannot see by sight, when we cannot see the way forward, God can. Faith is having it in your heart before you have it in your circumstance, sometimes long before you have it in your circumstance. We can trust God because he is faithful. He does everything for his glory and for our good. So I just want to finish with reading Psalm 23 to you. I love it, and it kind of brings great comfort to just listen to it. So I thought I would read it to you. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. I hope you have a super blessed week, and I pray, and I will be praying for you, that you walk in faith and that you find rest in God. I hope you have a really, really, really wonderful week, guys, and hopefully catch up with some of you soon. Bye.